Here's a guy who thinks the universe is made of woo.
What do you think this microphone in front of me is made out of?
I think it's made out of mental states, mind states. And the matter that we attribute to it is an extrinsic appearance and an image of mental states.
First of all, there's no such thing as mental states because nothing mental is ever static. Everything mental is an activity. The mental consists of thinking, feeling, perceiving, etc. And since the nature of an activity is that something has to carry it out, the mental cannot be the foundation of reality. There are no mental entities, there are only mental processes.
Okay, quite a concise answer to what can be in this context quite a complicated question, and perhaps one that's already raised a few eyebrows. I think that if you ask the average person on the street, what is a microphone made out of? They might tell you it's made out of metal. You ask them what metal's made out of, and you sort of keep going down until you get to it's made out of atoms, and you ask what's an atom made out of? Well, it's made out of, electrons, and what's an electron made out of? And they kind of begin to struggle a little bit. And this is an idea that I've been interested in recently, and there's this growing popularity in the suggestion that once we get down to the foundation of reality, we're talking about something like consciousness or mind.
For the reasons I've already explained, that's totally incoherent. Since the mind is an activity, if it's the fundamental basis of reality, what could possibly be carrying this activity out?
I've been talking about that in the context of panpsychism. You have a few choice words for panpsychism, which hopefully we can get into and we can critique it. But I think they kind of come from the same kind of starting point, which is that this assumption of materialism, that everything is kind of made up of stuff like, inert atoms that bump into each other, is somehow mistaken. Bearing in mind that probably the majority of people who are listening are materialists, I would assume. How do you begin getting into a discussion about what the world is really made of and trying to argue that materialism is false?
Well, we need to get out some of the false implications that people usually derive if I say that the microphone is made of mental state. I'm not denying metal. I'm not denying what appears to perception and measurement as matter, as atoms.
You are saying that they are concepts with no noumenal reference. In a sense, you are saying that they are fictional.
These things are empirically verified. We can measure this stuff. There is something out there that goes by the name of atom and metal and aluminium and so forth.
Where is out there if there's nothing beyond the mental?
None of that is denied. I'm not denying that there is an external world beyond my mind. What I'm saying is that these external world beyond my mind, just like my mind, is also made of mental states.
There are no mental states, only mental activities. Since that's the case, what's carrying out these mental activities that are out there? Even if there were such things as mental states, what is it exactly that's in those states? In order for a state of rest, for example, to exist, something more fundamental than the state has to be in that state.
And just as my mental states appear to you as matter, my brain, the atoms of my body, the very measurable, very physical stuff. So the mental states that constitute the external world appear to me as matter, part of which is this microphone made of mental states in front of you.
But what is it that's in those mental states? A state can't just exist on its own.
So we have to avoid this culture-induced wrong implications and false dichotomy and start by saying what we are not denying, so people don't run away with an assumption that is false, and then explain what we do mean.
It's not clear what the difference between Kastrup's idealism and George Berkeley's is. Berkeley also believed that things exist independent of his own mind. He believed that those things exist in God's mind.
So the real world, so to speak, is out there. Some people think that if you think that everything's made up of mind, that kind of the microphone is like just an idea in my head, or that I've somehow created it by my imagination, a bit like a dream that I'm having right now. But that's not what you're getting at, right?
It's not what I'm saying. What you are describing is either solipsism or a version of subjective idealism, a la Berkeley.
No, Berkeley also believed that things existed independent of his mind.
Who said, to be is to be perceived, so things exist only insofar as they are perceived. I'm not saying that.
Berkeley believed that things which exist outside of his own mind are perceived by God. If that's not what you're saying, how exactly do mental states exist without anybody to have those mental states?
What I'm saying is that, yes, there is a world out there independent of my mind, a world that does what it does and would still do it even if I were not here.
And Berkeley believed that too.
To perceive it, even if there were nobody here to perceive it.
How do mental activities occur if nobody's brain is carrying them out? What does it mean for a mental state to exist in the absence of any mind to be in that state? What is a mental state if it's not a state of a mind?
But that world too is just like me, is made of mental states. And when there is a perceiver, those mental states appear to the perceiver according to the qualities that we describe as physicality, like extension, texture, temperature, weight, and so forth.
So what's wrong with saying that, okay, I agree that there's a world outside of my own mental, perceptions, but that world is just a physical world, and all there is physicality, things like mass, charge, extension, texture, those kinds of things. If you just add those up together, you get a complete description of everything in the world, with the exception maybe of, conscious states like in human beings. But this microphone is just made out of physical material. What's wrong with that?
Well, it leads to all kinds of insoluble problems and significant implications that we don't need to deal with if this story is not true. Let me give you an example. If you say that, yes, all this physical stuff that we measure is the fundamental layer of reality, and there is nothing else that it is beyond how it appears to me.
I'm actually saying the opposite. I'm saying that there is something that exists independent of my mind and all that is mental, and that mental experiences of it don't necessarily completely encompass its ontology.
Basically, we are saying then that the noumena are the phenomena. The thing in itself is its appearance to observation.
No, again, I'm saying the opposite. That's idealist solipsism. What I'm saying is that there are noumena that are causing the phenomena I'm experiencing, which exist independent of those phenomena and all phenomena, and may not be entirely or faithfully depicted by the phenomena. That's the difference between phenomena, the experiences of a thing, and noumena, the thing that exists independent of experience. I don't know how this guy got the idea that materialism says that phenomena and noumena are the same thing when it actually says the exact opposite. Materialism says that they are distinct things.
And if we say that, we are saying that the world is made of non-conscious stuff, fundamentally non-conscious, because consciousness is precisely the idea that there is something it is like to be the world, beyond my own perception of it.
I've never heard that definition of consciousness before. My conception of consciousness is that there is a what it is likeness to at least some physical processes. This doesn't at all necessarily entail that there is something it is like to be the world or things in the world independent of my perception of them.
There is another ontological ground beyond how things appear to me. There is this thing as what something is in and for itself.
There is something that would exist even if no mental activities were ever carried out.
If we eliminate that, then we have to reduce consciousness to fundamentally unconscious stuff.
And to say that this is a problem is a compositional fallacy. There's no problem at all with consciousness being comprised of non-conscious elements. Material objects like brains can be conscious even if they're made out of atoms that are not conscious, just as water can be liquid without each individual water molecule being liquid.
Which nobody has managed to do, and I would claim it has been proven to be even an incoherent thing to try.
Quite the reverse. To say that consciousness, which is an activity, can exist without anything carrying it out is an outright contradiction.
It's wrong in principle. It's like saying, how do you reduce the number 5 to a marital status? Something illogical like this.
That would be as absurd as saying that an activity can occur without anything carrying it out, which is your position.
It leads to also unfortunate psychological implications, the most important of which is that if consciousness is just some kind of epiphenomenon, if mentation is an epiphenomenon of fundamentally non-mental stuff that exists only so far as the stuff I can measure about it, then we are oddities in the universe. We don't really belong here. We are a peculiar accident that's coming to an end. Our consciousness, if it is an epiphenomenon of particular configurations of matter, when those configurations cease to exist, like when my body decomposes and loses its structural and dynamic integrity, then my consciousness ends, and everything that it is like to be me comes to an end.
What's your point? You don't like the idea, therefore it can't be true? This makes me suspect that this guy's reasoning is a bit motivated.
And therefore, I'm already dead. I just don't know it yet.
How does that follow?
Everything is ultimately for nothing.
Well, let's say that mental states can exist independent of brains, so when your brain dies, there's an afterlife. If it is the case that your mind can exist independent of your brain, then why is it so tied to your brain right now? Why do we even have brains if they aren't responsible for consciousness?
All of these implications arise from this seemingly small step of saying, well, if we are all acknowledging that there is an external world, it is not a big deal to say, then it is just what it seems to be.
It would, in fact, be a big deal to say that because it doesn't follow at all. If there is a world that exists independent of mental states, then it wouldn't be a big deal to say that mental states may not be depicting it fully or accurately.
In other words, it's just what I can measure, it's just what I perceive.
No, materialism entails that there is something independent of what I can measure and perceive. This guy is confusing materialism with solipsism.
And there is no inner world to it, there is no inner being to it.
If by inner being he means that it has some kind of experience of its own, materialism has nothing to say about that per se. Panpsychism can be perfectly compatible with materialism. It could be the case that matter, energy, space, and time are the fundamental elements of reality, and that they all have some what-it-is likeness to them, rather than only brains. I don't believe this to be the case, but there is nothing inherent to materialism or physicalism that rules this out.
It seems like a small step, but it is a gigantic, not only logically and empirically unjustified, but a gigantic step as far as human psychology and culture are concerned, and it's unfortunate.
My suspicion is growing that this guy's primary concern is the cultural effects of the idea of physicalism rather than its soundness.
Can you talk to me about the difference between qualities and quantities and why that's relevant here and what it says about the materialist hypothesis?
Quantities are descriptions. If I take this bottle of water and I put a tape measure next to it and I say, well, this is 45 centimeters long, that's a description of my experience of seeing the water bottle. If you tell me it's 45 centimeters, I'll have an idea of what to expect if I were to perceive it. If you tell me it's 45 kilometers, then I'll have a very different expectation of what I would experience when I perceived it. So quantities, the entire stuff that constitutes the substance of science, are descriptions. Qualities are the thing described.
Then what are qualitative descriptions? If I describe its color or its taste, I'm not using units of measurement, but I am still giving a description.
Qualities are the stuff that appears on the screen of perception, the stuff we are acquainted with before we take a tape measure to it.
You make it sound like descriptions can't be made without a measuring device.
I know that there are qualities associated with this water bottle. I feel its weight. I feel its texture. I see the quality of its colors, the silver, the white, the black, the patterns of pigment on it. These are qualities.
And you're describing them without any numbers or measuring devices. None of these are things in themselves. The things in themselves are the matter and what the matter is doing that is interacting with your nervous system and producing perceptions.
Qualities are experiential states, what it feels like to perceive, to feel, to do, and so forth.
And what do you think is carrying out the perceiving, feeling, and doing, if not a material brain?
Quantities are descriptions of what appears on the screen of perception, which of course is eminently qualitative. Everything on the screen of perception is qualitative. Colors, textures, sounds, melodies, aromas, flavors, and so forth. All of it is qualitative. Quantities are how we describe the stuff that appears on the screen of perception.
Again, this guy seems to have narrowed the definition of describe to an act of applying units of measurement to something.
Now, what is cruel about our cultural situation is that even though we all start from qualities, 300,000 years ago when Homo sapiens took the first step, well, maybe a little longer than that, all we had were qualities. And then at some point, couple of hundred years ago, we discovered it was very useful to describe these qualities through quantities.
That's cruel? How is that cruel?
And now we think all there is are quantities. And qualities are somehow epiphenomenal, a sort of a magic trick conjured up by the meat inside your skull.
Quantities are as well. Kilometers weren't discovered in nature, they were invented.
It's a peculiar cultural evolution, and if you really contemplate it along its historical axes, it is incredibly nonsensical. Future generations will have a good laugh at us, at our expense.
Right, because nobody ever laughs at idealism.
I have no doubt. You expound upon this criticism in, I mean, two of your books, Why Materialism is Baloney and also Analytic Idealism in a Nutshell. Analytic Idealism is the name of your worldview. And you press this point, I think, quite powerfully, that once explained seems actually a little bit obvious. That, yeah, we sort of describe the world in terms of mathematical formulations, its weight, its extension, its length, that kind of stuff. But the thing in itself has to precede the evaluation and description of and prediction about the behaviors of the thing. The thing itself has to exist in the first place.
Yes, and that's the materialist and physicalist position. Not only does the thing have to precede the description, it also has to precede the perception. It has to precede mentality in order for it to interact with the nervous system and cause it to carry out the act of perceiving it.
And you've compared this before to going like hiking in the mountains and using a map and being like, you experience the mountains and you've tried to describe very accurately the topography of the mountain range on this piece of paper, which you call a map. And then somehow people have begun to think that instead of the map being, emergent of the mountain, you had the mountain and then you made the map out of it, that somehow the mountain sort of mysteriously comes out of the map, and that the map is the only thing we have, and that the mountain is just emergent from this descriptive thing that we came up with like 10 years ago.
Again, this is the opposite of the materialist and physicalist position, which is that the mountain not only exists independent of the map, it also exists independent of your experience, and possibly even independent of any and all experience or any mental states at all. To everyone who helps me out on Patreon, you're a big help. Thanks so much.